Now, continuing the series on church finances, in this video I will speak on debt. To be clear, when I say debt, I'm not referring to credit, as in borrowing money. So what am I referring to? Well, let's take this from the top. When we analyze our offerings, we should divide them into two main categories: debt and investment. Now, I'll discuss the investment category in a subsequent video, but right now let's look at the debt category. Debt offerings is the money that each member of the church owes their local church. Now, the fact that we owe something to our church is news to many Christians, maybe even to you. And that is symptomatic of Christ's observation that Christians tend to be bad with money. Now, Christians tend to think of offerings as an occasional charity, or worse yet, as some form of bribery, given when they really need or want something from God. Of course, the other extreme would be those that preach Old Testament tithing as if it were a New Testament spiritual duty. And they publicly pressure the congregants to supposedly not rob God. Some churches apply this pressure rather benignly, by the ceremonious passing of an offering plate, which is designed to apply peer pressure on the congregants to give. Now, I think churches should just have a discreet offering box in the back of the church that you can drop your check into. However, some churches are a bit more heavy-handed, and they will post the names of the persons who have faithfully given their tithes. Others go so far as to publicly display the names of those who haven't paid the uttermost farthing. Now, both the charity approach as well as the imposed tithing approach err in not understanding the true nature of offerings. So let's be clear. Offerings are voluntary. The Bible teaches us that each person should give as they purpose in their own heart. However, each person should give. So when we categorize offerings as a debt, it's important to understand that we're saying that they are a moral debt. They're a debt imposed on us by our own conscience. They're not something that the church sends out Cousin Vinny to collect, kneecapping the brethren. However, analyzing them as a debt is useful for clarifying the two main objectives of offerings. The first objective of offerings is to properly defray our portion of the operating costs of the church, such as building expenses, utilities, and conference expenditures. It's simple adult responsibility to pay our own way. We all know this. We know that the rent doesn't pay itself. We know that electricity isn't free. And we all know that hymnals don't grow on trees. Okay, well, maybe they grow on trees, but they don't grow on trees for free. That's why it's so incongruent that this is shocking to some Christians. These same mortified prigs aren't the least bit surprised when the grocer expects them to pay for the food that they load into their shopping baskets, or when the electric bill comes due each month, or when the gas pump requires them to insert their debit card. And if they were to take a road trip with friends, they would insist on chipping in their fair share. So how is the church any different? What is the cost of the chair that you sit in? Or how about the hymnal that you sing from? Or how much does it cost to heat and cool the building so you can enjoy it in the winter and in the summer? See that donut in your hand? See that taco in the other hand? How much do those cost? And if all of these things have a cost, then you should ask yourself, what is your part in that cost? And that is your debt. Now, the second objective of offerings is the legitimate remuneration of those that minister to you. Anyone who provides you a service should be compensated commensurately of the quality of that service and the benefit that you enjoy from it. This is not a love offering. In other words, it's not a charitable gift, and it's not a tip. It's a debt. The Apostle Paul taught clearly in 1 Corinthians 9, as well as other passages, that a debt is incurred when others minister to us spiritually, such as teaching and preaching and pastoring, among other ministries. These are endeavors that require time. They consume resources, and they provide tangible benefits. As such, they both cost money, and they're deserving of remuneration. Even though this might sound similar to storehouse tithing, it's significantly more nuanced. While it is true that ministers are worthy of their hire, and those that receive spiritual benefit owe carnal remuneration, it's also true that each Christian must decide for themselves what that hire should be and what value the minister has provided them. It's legitimate and desirable for a congregant to discern between a good preacher and a poor one, between a solicitous pastor and an inattentive one, between an enlightening teacher and a torpid one, as well as all degrees of competence between those two extremes. As Paul taught, ministers who conduct their ministry well are worthy of more. He said they're worthy of double honor, especially those that do so under the burden of multiple ministries, such as ruling, teaching, and preaching. This individual assessment is critical to the proper and fitting discharge of our debt. That's true. But it's also critical to the ensuring of a meaningful and profitable ministry. When we compensate lousy teachers the same as we would excellent ones, we perpetuate lousy teaching, and we discourage the level of effort and investment that excellence requires. I mean, would you pay a lousy mechanic who breaks your car worse the same as you would a good one who can restore it to its original state? If so, the next time you break down, call me. I'll also not fix it, and I'll do it for half price. Now, one objection to performance-based offerings is that it allegedly encourages ministers to pander to the congregation. However, that assumes that people will spend their hard-earned money on preachers who merely stoke their egos, as opposed to bringing their conscience under conviction, which is why people who are willing to spend their hard-earned money go to church in the first place. And if that were the case, wouldn't it also stand to reason that the wealthiest doctors would be the ones that always tell their patients that there's nothing wrong with them, even as they lie dying in hospital beds? As we said in the video on stewardship, one of the principal problems with church finances is that too many Christians have not been properly educated as to their responsibility and individual sovereignty when it comes to money. But another of the principal problems is that church leaders have relied too heavily on a combination of misapplied doctrines and cultish haranguing to raise funds. The church elders need to first understand these principles of debt so as to be able to clearly articulate them to the church. But then they must allow that the adults in the congregation will evaluate and discharge their duty faithfully and intelligently, trusting that they also serve the Lord as they are persuaded in their own minds.